Okay, so we're recording. So my honors research project is looking at the criteria to evaluate a possible investment car to see if it will be a good investment.
Okay.
So trying to determine some sort of criteria to determine if it will be a good investment in the future.
If I could tell you that, I'd be a billionaire. If I could tell you that with any certainty.
That's what I'm trying to establish some sort of a criteria. It may not be perfect, but
Okay.
so we can start now. So it's just a list of questions.
Okay.
And we'll just go from there. So the first one is just more getting to know you in the industry and your background. How long have you been involved in the collectible car space and industry?
Probably since I've been 6 or 7 years old.
And if I may ask, how old are you now?
I'm 46.
Okay, so you've been in it for a good amount of time.
Most of my life, yeah.
Okay. And has your involvement in the industry been in a personal or professional capacity?
Both.
Could you elaborate a little bit?
I collect cars myself, and I have I've based my business on my hobby.
And your business is dealing in buying and selling collectible cars?
My business is finding, dealing, anything to do with collectible and classic and interesting cars.
Okay. Has your focus been primarily on collectible cars that are considered as classics? So that would be like maybe older cars, or does it extend to modern collectible cars as well?
So what you need to know, what I need to tell you is, there's various definitions of a collectible car. So obviously a collectible car is pretty self-explanatory. The classic car, the true definition of a classic car would be, for example, this is how the Americans sort of define it. It's a classic. In other words, so if you, in 1925, a Model T was $400, but a Duesenberg was $20,000.
Yeah.
And you could buy 10 houses for the price of one Duesenberg.
Yeah.
So therefore, the Duesenberg is a classic car. It's an exceptional quality, limited numbers. That's the true definition of a classic car.
Okay.
In South Africa and most of the world, we just use it as a very broad and vague description. But if you really wanted to actually look up the definition, that is the definition of a classic car.
Okay, so if we're extending, so my research is it's embodying both classic and collectible cars. And on that note, do you believe that there are vehicles built after 2000 that are collectible?
There are many. At the moment, there's a couple. So if you look at something like a Honda S2000, a lot of the BMW M cars, Lamborghini, Ferrari, even something like as mundane as a Fiat 500 Abarth, which, well, not really mundane, but even something like a Fiat 500 Abarth. Now, then you could break it down into things like a cult classic, so there's various definitions. Most people will collect a car that they find, that they were drawn to, when you were 18, I didn't ask how old you are, but if you're doing your master's, I guess you're probably 23, 24, yeah. I would guess. Okay. So a lot of people, like my era in 1996, the Uno Turbos and the Mazda EGRs and the BMW M3s and the 325RSs and the 333s and, those sort of cars came out. And a lot of the guys, I couldn't, guys buy cars that they either aspired to owning. So when you were 18, you saw a Ferrari or something, and now you've turned 65 and you're slightly sort of, you're retiring, you've got a bit more money, you've got some excess cash, and you'll go and buy that car that you could never afford at 18 years old. And that plays a huge part in cars. Okay, there's obviously exceptions, but that's probably one of the biggest reasons. So that's one reason. The other reason is your dad had one, granddad had one. You used to go to university in one, or and guys want to relive their younger years or reminisce.
Right.
Then there's sort of the more fashionable. There's a movie or something like Gone in 60 Seconds, and
with the Eleanor,
suddenly discovers a Mustang Eleanor because that was in the movie. Although it was, so there's various reasons why people collect cars. So there's many sort of offshoots and offsprings of why people actually chase cars or buy cars.
Well, that leads us on nicely to the next section, which is particularly looking at collectible cars as investments. So do you believe that the collectible vehicle space in South Africa is growing, and how does it compare to the international market?
Okay, so there's very, very, when you say an investment, there are very, very, very few cars that are an investment. You need to house it somewhere. You need to fix it. You need to maintain it. You need to drive it. You need to insure it. When you're dealing with a car that's 30 and 40 and 50 and 80 and 100 years old, things break. Okay? So when you talk about an investment car, how much of an investment is it? A lot of my interest is based on purely the engineering and the enjoyment and all of that sort of thing about a car. Now, there are investment cars. There's very few in South Africa. When you talk about an investment car, you're talking about Ferrari and Bentley and Bugatti and certain Alfa Romeos and Duesenberg and Isotta Francini or Avion Vasson or V16 Cadillacs or limited edition Lamborghinis and Gullwing Mercedes Benzes and stuff like that. So there's an investment cars and then there's investment cars. So in South Africa, we've got very few of those true blue chip cars. Some of that stuff sits overseas in museums and private collections.
So I'm more looking at, like, say, for example, something like, a 65 Mustang or something even like a E46 M3, the more entry level things. Okay.
So let's take, for example, the thing that's hot at the moment. And these things go through stages. As I say, depending on normally a car becomes very collectible when it reaches 40 years old. So if you are 18 plus 40, what that makes you 58, you're getting ready for retirement, you've got some money, and that's when the car really becomes, is my maths right? I've only got a standard 8.
Yeah.
So a car really only becomes really collectible. So let's take an E30 BMW. Let's take a 333 BMW or let's take a 325 RS.
Okay.
Limited numbers, made in South Africa. It was a South African special. It was quite a desirable car when it was new. And you could probably pick that car up in the early 90s. I'm not sure what they sold for new, but you'd probably pick that car up at about 110, 120 grand.
Okay.
As the car becomes more desirable and more people chase the car, it becomes a supply and demand issue more than anything else. It almost pushes the value. You want one? Yes. Well, you pay my price or you can't have it. And it will sort of move that way. And that's what also pushes a lot of the values is very much a supply and demand.
Okay. All right.
If there's 2 325 RSs on the market, it's depending on who's buying, depending on who's looking, depending on the condition of the car, the quality of the car, what's the mileage, doesn't have books, what's the history, has it had any accidents, who's owned the car, where has it been, there can be 2 cars, but, sorry, there's the door, just give me, Charlie, sorry, the doorbell.